I've decided to buy a house where my parents and older sister can live with us, I told Keith. If you don't like this idea, we might need to consider a divorce. Keith's eyes narrowed, but his smile never wavered. Are you sure you won't regret that decision? He asked calmly. Absolutely not, he said with confidence, his grin widening as if there was no doubt in his mind. However, about a month later, he found himself in a situation he hadn't expected. My name is Amy, and I'm 40 years old, working as an office assistant. I live with my wonderful husband Keith and our energetic 8-year-old daughter. Our family is tight-knit, and we cherish the time we spend together. Weekends are often filled with either outings or quiet evenings at home, and our dinner conversations are always lively, brimming with laughter. Despite the usual busyness of life, I've always felt that we were content and secure. But then, an unexpected phone call from the hospital shook that sense of peace. Your mother has been admitted to the hospital, the voice on the other end informed me. My heart stopped for a moment, and in a flurry of panic, I left work and rushed to the hospital. Mom, are you okay? I asked, bursting into her room. Amy, thank you for coming. I'm so sorry for making you worry, my mother said weakly from the hospital bed. She had collapsed suddenly, and though the doctors assured me she was stable, seeing her like that was a jarring reminder of her age. I was terrified when I got the call, I admitted, sitting by her side. My mother, now 70, had been living alone ever since my father passed away. I'd worried about her, but I never imagined something like this happening. The doctors aren't sure yet what caused it, she said. They're going to run more tests once I'm a bit stronger. I nodded. Being here is better for now. They'll be able to take care of you. After spending some time with her, I returned home, still shaken. Keith was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and our daughter greeted me with a big hug. Seeing them gave me a sense of comfort. How's your mom doing? Keith asked, setting the table. She's stable for now, but they want to keep her in the hospital for a while, I replied. That must be worrying, he said sympathetically, and I appreciated his concern. As we sat down for dinner, I felt the weight of my thoughts pressing on me. I'd been thinking about this for a while, but now it seemed more urgent. I glanced at Keith, hesitating. Finally, I spoke. After Mom is discharged, I was thinking about having her move in with us. What do you think? I held my breath, unsure how he would react. It was a big ask, and I valued his opinion deeply. Keith looked at me thoughtfully, then smiled. Given her age and health, it makes sense. I feel better if she were here with us, where we can take care of her together. A wave of relief and joy washed over me. His support meant the world to me, and I couldn't hold back my emotions. Thank you. I love you so much, I whispered, tears filling my eyes as we embraced. Our daughter, watching intently, piped up, Daddy, that was so cool. We all laughed, the moment of tension replaced with warmth. The next day, I returned to the hospital, my heart a little lighter. As I walked in the sterile hallway and entered my mother's room, I found her gazing out the window, lost in thought. Mom, I said softly, approaching her bedside. How would you feel about coming to live with us once you're discharged? I think you should come live with us, Mom, I said gently. She looked at me, a mix of surprise and confusion in her eyes. Really? She asked, her voice hesitant. I'd been so worried about her living alone. I just want you to be nearby, I added, hoping to ease her concerns. But she hesitated. Are you sure I won't be a burden? It'll be fine, I reassured her. I talked to Keith about it yesterday, and he's fully on board. For a moment, her face brightened, but it quickly faded into uncertainty. I'm happy to hear that, but I'm not sure about moving in, she confessed, her hesitation clear. Actually, they've decided I'll need long-term treatment here. My heart sank. I had been so hopeful about her moving in with us, starting a new chapter together, but this unexpected news hit hard. What do you mean, Mom? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She took a deep breath, her eyes downcast as the sunlight filtered into the quiet room. Outside, the distant sounds of children playing only made the moment feel heavier. Then she finally spoke the words I wasn't ready for. I've been scared to tell you, but there's no point hiding it anymore. She paused, her expression strained. I have cancer, and it's bad. Her voice was calm, too calm. What? I managed to say, but nothing more. I felt my chest tighten as the reality of her words set in. They say I may have a year left at most, but it could be much less. She added, her eyes welling up with tears. I was in shock. My mind couldn't grasp the thought of my mother, the strong, steady presence in my life, going through something like this. Amy, I'm sorry. I didn't want to drop this on you. Hearing her say my name snapped me back to the moment. I'm shocked, Mom. I'm just so worried about you. Tears blurred my vision as they spilled down my cheeks. She looked at me, her own eyes brimming with tears. I should have told you sooner, she whispered. But it still doesn't feel real to me either. I took her hand, gripping it tightly. It's just so unexpected. I want you to get better. That's all I want. She smiled softly despite her tears. Thank you, Amy. And thank you for suggesting we live together. Just knowing I have you all by my side makes me feel stronger. We held each other's hands, crying together, letting the emotions wash over us. After the tears had flowed and we'd begun to process everything, I looked into her eyes and said, I'll come see you every day, Mom. I promise. I squeezed my mother's hand, trying to offer comfort. She, always thinking of me, smiled softly. Every day might be too much, Amy. Take care of yourself, too. I want to spend as much time with you as possible, I said, my voice full of emotion. If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to tell me. She smiled warmly. Okay, thank you. When I got home, I immediately told my husband about my mother's condition. Wait, terminal cancer. Is it really true? Your mother's going through that. His voice was filled with shock, and tears welled up in his eyes. You don't need to worry about us while you're with your mom in the hospital. I'll do whatever I can to help, he said, gently caressing my head. All I could manage was a tearful thank you. His words gave me strength. From that point on, I started going straight to the hospital after work, treasuring every moment with my mother. On weekends, my husband and daughter joined us, and together we filled the hospital room with cheerful conversations and laughter. My husband's kindness and support during this difficult time meant the world to me. Because of him, I could focus on cherishing these precious moments with my mom. But as time passed, my mother's condition began to worsen. Mom, are you okay? I asked one day, unable to hide my concern. She took a deep breath and whispered, to be honest, the pain is getting worse. She held my hand gently, her touch weak, but full of love. Amy, there's something else I've been thinking about, she said. Maybe we should talk about the inheritance. Mom, we don't need to have such a serious conversation now, I quickly replied, my voice shaking. Tears were threatening to spill from both of us. I know, but it's important. I want you to know my wishes, she said, her eyes glistening with tears. Okay, Mom, I whispered, trying to hold back my own tears. I'll listen. And as the conversation unfolded, we held on to each other, feeling the weight of the moment, but also the deep love that connected us. I was stunned by my mother's confession. She had assets worth $1.3 million. Oh my, is that true? I couldn't hide my surprise. Yes, she said with a shy smile. Your father owned properties, and after inheriting them, I invested even more. Why have you kept such a big secret until now? I asked, gazing into her eyes. I'm sorry, Amy, she replied softly, but I wanted you to know when the time was right. I want you to inherit my assets and continue to grow them. Her eyes sparkled with determination. When I was a child, my parents had always taught me the importance of investments, though I never fully understood why. It had always seemed like just another subject to study. I have a confession, I said quietly. I've actually been studying investments on my own for a while now. My mother looked surprised but proud. That's wonderful, she said. All those years of advice have led to this. But listen carefully, Amy, this is really important. Be cautious when talking about assets. I know you'll be responsible, but only discuss it with those you truly trust. I understand, I promise. The person I trusted most, of course, was my husband, Keith. He had always supported me and taken me seriously. But it didn't feel like the right time to share my mother's inheritance with him just yet. I decided to wait. About a month later, my mother passed away peacefully. I was filled with gratitude for the time I had spent with her in those final weeks. We had shared so many meaningful conversations and memories. It was truly a blessing. After her passing, my husband and I made arrangements for the funeral and memorial service. On a quiet night, sometime later, I finally felt ready to talk to Keith about the inheritance. You know, Mom left me an inheritance, I began nervously. It's about $1.3 million. Keith's eyes widened in shock. Wait, what? Are you serious? He asked, unable to hide his surprise. Yes, I nodded. No joke. Wow, $1.3 million, he repeated, still processing the news. That's incredible. I looked at him seriously. Please promise me you won't tell anyone else. I'm only sharing this with people I trust, I said, holding his hand and pleading for reassurance. Don't worry, I promise I won't tell anyone, he replied, looking straight into my eyes. Thank you, I sighed in relief, feeling better after confiding in him about the inheritance. Though the sudden reality of such a large amount of money had overwhelmed me, I felt comforted knowing we could calmly plan our future together. However, as the days went by, something in his behavior started to change. One day, I noticed a shiny new watch on his wrist. Did you buy that recently? I asked, surprised. Yeah, I just liked it, he said with a grin. It's very stylish. How much was it? Around $22,000, I guess. $22,000? Why did you spend so much? I nearly shouted, shocked. Come on, we have so much money now. A little luxury is okay, right? He replied, his tone lighthearted. But it worried me. This wasn't how we usually lived. Isn't that a bit much? We have $1.3 million, yes, but shouldn't we be more careful with it? I questioned. We can afford to splurge a bit, he said casually. I mean, why not? I've always supported you. Remember when you were visiting your mom in the hospital? I took care of everything at home. A chill ran down my spine. He was speaking as if the inheritance belonged solely to him. I was thinking of saving this money for our daughter's future and our retirement, I responded, trying to rein in my frustration. For a moment, he looked confused, then defensive. Come on, we can enjoy it a little. Don't forget all I've done for you. I do appreciate everything, I hesitated, genuinely grateful for his support during my mother's illness, but something felt off. His behavior was changing, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. Luxurious items started appearing at home more frequently, and his priorities seemed to shift. Don't you think you've been acting a bit differently? I finally asked, the concern evident in my voice. I gently asked, why don't we just forget about the inheritance for a while and focus on getting back to our normal lives? He looked at me, his eyes sparkling with something unsettling beneath the surface. Isn't it strange that you don't get it? If something you want is right in front of you, why wouldn't you go after it? A pang of sadness washed over me. The warmth in his smile, the everyday happiness we used to share, all seemed distant now. The man I knew had never been this obsessed with money. Every time he excitedly talked about buying a new car or moving into a high-rise apartment, my heart sank. I've told you before, I wasn't planning on spending it that way, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Let's stop discussing the inheritance for a while. He looked at me, genuinely surprised. What? Haven't I always supported you? Don't I have a right to spend some of it? Do you plan on keeping it all for yourself? No, that's not what I mean, I replied, feeling a growing tension between us. I just want us to be more careful with it. His eyes narrowed, suspicion creeping into his voice. Are you secretly spending it on something? How did it come to this? When had his attitude changed so drastically? It felt like there was an invisible wall between us now, and every conversation was shrouded in tension. Then, one day, he dropped a bombshell. I bought a house, he announced, his excitement barely contained. For me, my parents, and my sister to live in. What? My voice trembled, a mix of shock and anxiety rising in my chest. What are you talking about? He just smiled brightly, oblivious to the storm he had unleashed. I used the entire inheritance to buy it. The house will be perfect for 3 generations, my husband said, his tone filled with pride. Wait, you spent my money to buy the house. I tried to keep calm, but the shock was too much to contain. This is the best choice, you'll see, he said, his voice void of remorse, just full of excitement. I took a deep breath, trying to wrap my head around what he had done. There are a lot of things I can't accept about this, I said firmly. He smiled and without hesitation replied, if you can't agree, we might have to consider divorce. If that happens, you'll find it hard to live comfortably on your own. His confidence shook me, but doubts were already creeping in. Could he really handle such a large purchase on his own? There was no way. Are you sure you're okay with getting a divorce? You won't regret it, I asked, looking him straight in the eyes. He didn't flinch. There's no way I'd regret it, he said, still smiling. But that confident smile would disappear soon enough. A month later, I casually asked him, which contractor are we using to build the house? He mentioned a construction company owned by an old friend of his father's. Something didn't sit right. Have you changed your mind about the house and us? From now on, make sure to get my permission, okay? I said, testing the waters. He seemed to misunderstand me, but I let it go for the moment. I made up my mind to visit the construction company myself. When I arrived, I was greeted warmly, but what I discovered left me speechless. Apparently, my husband and in-laws had submitted a signed power of attorney, supposedly with my consent, a document I had no memory of signing. In fact, I had no idea about any of this. I'd like to have the handwriting verified, I said firmly, knowing that legal action might be necessary to resolve this. The employee went pale. I didn't realize, if it came from your father-in-law, we should have confirmed it before proceeding. We'll contact the manager and see if we can cancel the process. It was clear they understood the seriousness of the situation. Then an idea popped into my head. Please don't tell my husband or in-laws about this just yet, I requested, curious to see how they'd react. They agreed, and I quietly found a beautiful new apartment for myself. A fresh start. A few days later, I told my husband, our life together can't go back to the way it was. I'm considering divorce. I told him gently. For a moment, he looked shocked, but his expression quickly shifted into a smug smile. Are you sure? You're going to miss out on our grand house, he said, almost tauntingly. Yes, that'll be fine, I calmly replied, knowing he still had no idea the house wasn't actually his. I'll take care of our daughter so we can skip the property settlement, I suggested. He responded with a wide, confident grin. Fine, have it your way. We have our new house, after all, he bragged, still oblivious to the truth. I silently thanked the company staff for keeping the secret. Surprisingly, the divorce process went smoothly, and my daughter and I were able to start our new life quickly. She was excited for a fresh start, especially after being unsettled by her father's increasingly erratic behavior. Our new apartment, though not overly expensive, was perfect, modern, secure, and cozy. Even though I had the inheritance, I didn't want to live extravagantly. I just wanted a peaceful life with my daughter. A month into our new routine, I received an unexpected call from my ex-husband. He had been calling relentlessly, but I finally picked up. Hello. Well, the house construction has been canceled. Do you know anything about this? His voice was filled with anger. Oh, so you finally realized? I replied, calm but firm. What do you mean? That's our house, isn't it? Well, you signed the contract without discussing it with me, thinking you could use my money. Since everything was under my name, the house wasn't really yours. And by the way, using that fake power of attorney, it made the whole thing invalid. There was a pause before he responded, panic evident in his voice. Wait, so what am I supposed to do now? My parents already sold their old house and they're living with me. They were counting on the new place. I'm sorry, but that's something you'll have to figure out on your own. It has nothing to do with my daughter and me. We're going to live peacefully from now on. I can't believe this. I didn't think it would come to this. Amy, isn't there any way we could reconsider the divorce? I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. No, I've already started my new life. And speaking of the future, I have a small request. Please stop contacting me. If I see you around, I'll call the police. The whole house situation was entirely your fault. I could actually sue you for what you did. But I won't this time. Just stay away from my daughter and me. There was a long silence, followed by a mixture of disbelief and reluctant acceptance. All right, he muttered, the fear of legal consequences likely sinking in. Later, I heard from a friend that my ex-in-laws had made reckless purchases and racked up debts after losing money in the stock market. They had set their sights on my assets, but it all backfired. I couldn't help but think, that's unbelievable. But it was no longer my concern. What mattered now was my peaceful life with my daughter. My focus was on supporting her dreams and securing a bright future for her. As for the inheritance, I planned to invest it wisely and build a better